meaning transparency instituted by Gorbachev. It didn't go very well. And all the lines in the poem were at the time phrases that if you punch them into a search engine or your phone, purportedly, I don't know if this is true anymore, would get you red flagged on a government watch list. Glasnost. But how do I get rid of a body? Or instructions for scrambling a frequency? And what are the jobs exactly near the White House? Or best practices for smothering a cry? But who exactly cooks the president's breakfast? And how do I get rid of the body? Or instructions for breaking a chokehold? But when exactly do I disable the firewall? Or best practices for forging a signature? And what room exactly does the president sleep in, but how do I get rid of a body? Or instructions for filing off serial numbers? And where exactly is the silent alarm located? Or best practices for taking a bullet? Or what exactly explodes when you touch it, and how do I get rid of a body? Or instructions for absorbing a blow? Or where exactly can I purchase a hollow point? Or best practices for soldering a wound? And what time exactly does the president eat? And how exactly do I get rid of a body? Or instructions for detaining a prisoner? And how many yards exactly to the door? Or best practices for obtaining a death certificate? But how tall exactly is the fence that surrounds it? And how exactly do I get rid of a body? Or instructions for manufacture of tear gas? Well, how do I erase my identity? Or best practices for building a dead switch, and how far exactly without breaking a bone? But how do I get rid of a body? Or instructions for bugging a boardroom, and where exactly can I locate the safety? Or best practices for home cooking napalm? Where do I purchase the firearm? And how do I get rid of the body? Or instructions for strapping on Kevlar? But who exactly are the names on the watch list? Or best practices for squeezing the trigger, and how exactly do I clear the room? But how do I get rid of the body? Or instructions for securing a blindfold, and how many years exactly for treason? Or best practices for beating a death warrant, but how close without tripping a wire? And how do I get rid of a body? The work of the poet John Ashby was not hugely influential upon me personally, but he hugely influenced one poem in this book. He recently passed, as I'm sure many of you know, so I kind of wanted to just sort of fill the air with the line of his that sort of informed this poem, and then I'll read the poem as well. The poem's called The New Spirit. It comes from his book, 3 Poems, which a lot of people love, and I love as well. The lines are, I thought that if I could put it all down, that would be one way. And next the thought came to me that to leave it all out would be another and truer way. The poem I wrote is called Cold Open, which is sort of the cinematic technique of beginning a show or a movie in the middle of the scene without rolling credit. Cold Open. It was the thought that if you could watch, if I could leak to the public the film of when I needed to reach you, that would be one way. From a little-known bluff overgrown last summer with wildflowers, if you could watch a family of turkeys, a mother and her 162 poults, if you could watch them abandon their roost on the lowest branch of a cottonwood tree, and lugging 163 tow cables behind them when they departed, if you could watch them dragging the tree through a field overgrown last summer with tanglehead grass, and discarding the yellow tree piteously across the rails of the Sunset Limited, which was carrying that day exactly 162 passengers west to their sentencings. It could be one way, I kept telling myself, to awake and fall when everyone's sentenced, and film myself shut of those dead to me. If the lights could come up on my train in a field overgrown last summer with tanglehead. If we could slow to a halt in front of the yellow tree obstructing our path. There could be a smashed cut, an establishing shot of the bluff where you knelt cutting wildflowers. And off camera, the cottonwood could start hemorrhaging yellow termites. If you could see the mites glowing yellow, having drunk the yellow blood of the tree. And if I could leak to you what the camera work couldn't. In a hand-me-down suit, there's an unsavory man. He's inside a Renaissance cherry casket, and the casket's buried 8 feet beneath the Sunset Limited's engine room, and the casket's rigged on the inside with a hand-cranked generator with Christmas lights in 5 colors. If we could leak red first, then blue, then green before we leaked orange, and last yellow, the light of which illuminates the interior of the casket enough for the man, he's still alive, to watch his face decompose in the mirror that's rigged to the ceiling. If we could cut to the sentence handed down to the man many years ago, that any unsavory man is a man who should watch himself die. If there could be a slow zoom on a woman's hands typing 8 words in first class, a slow dissolve to a child in coach, if he touched a text that said, "Don't change for you, don't change for me." If there's no ellipses, no period at the end, if he doesn't even need to ask who it's from. And from a little-known bluff, you could stand up with a fistful of wildflowers. You could watch the faces of 162 passengers darken unannounced as if from a lightning storm. If the cottonwood could stand up from the rails and dust off her own blood herself and resume her cold work untangling the grasses. And if you could watch my train resume this terrible campaign for the West. Unseen for you, I could stay buried here beneath 162 suitcases with the rest of the stowaways. I think I'll just read one more because it's got a little bit of meat and potatoes to it, as they say. It's the title poem of the book, which is called Trebuchet. I've also been sick for like 2 weeks, and I have this weird throat thing, so if I have to violently cough in the middle of it, I apologize. Trebuchet. These poems were written to land you on a government watch list and published in 1995 paperback, hardcover edition unreleased, by an imposter of Faber and Faber of 320 South Jackson Street, Athens, inside a warehouse formerly occupied by 6 Pinkerton deserters in this year of our Lord, 2017, the year of the so-called accident. Or maybe to throw a brick through the wall of the White House and no note attached is their business. These poems come pepper-sprayed for your health with dirty words, particularly on pages 7, 19, 29, 66, and 70, and were written by one D. Skonebeck, an oftentimes troubled and defamatory young girl living among clearly the worst generation of profiteers and balaclavas and who somehow keeps herself violent through love. Or maybe to start a riot inside the insurgents inside of the skirmish is their business. Their weight is 9.356 ounces. They will travel 732 feet in 12 seconds when fired from a trebuchet. Their burning temperature is still Fahrenheit 451, and they were printed in these United States by McNaughton Gun of Saline, Michigan. Or maybe to smuggle the anthem back inside the chrysanthemum is their business. On the day of its publication, this book would buy you 4 loaves rye peasant bread, 8 white bootlaces, 1 liter vodka filtered through cheesecloth, 5 pounds goose feathers, 0 theater tickets, 7 single rides on Manhattan-bound bus lines, 3 boxes baby diapers, 11 yards steel chain, 0 paintings, 5 cartons eggs, or a starred review in Publishers Weekly. What else do you expect for 1995? No, really, what do you demand of your money? What is the so-called function of police? This book's international standard book number is 978-08203-49923, and this is the same number of school shootings since 1986. These poems will offend a number of people who will refuse to ignore them, some of them people with what I like to call fathers, Fathers-in-law are fathers on Capitol Hill, and men and women of influence with fathers of money in Iowa. Their commercial potential is laughable. The big five publishers will spend zero money printing these poems, zero money ordering cured meat for the book party, and the ruling class will read them, but only on days when a family member is assassinated or during a nationally televised tragedy. And they'll go ahead and tell you the middle class is vanishing, but the middle class will in fact beat itself to death with this book. The middle class will call this young girl a woman of hatred of men. The middle class will critique her. The middle class will call her a national treasure. The middle class will market her, and the middle class will interrogate her about her sex. And they'll go on and tell you the middle class has vanished, but it's the poor of this country, in fact, who should rear up and throw books of poetry through the walls of the White House and no list of demands attached. These poems are dedicated to no man, no woman who's yet been born, to the slugs that will never leave your gun, to milkmen, Miss Universe, snake oil salesmen, Russian volleyball champions, grave diggers, bribed congressmen, waste managers, astronauts, deserters, zookeepers, mega millions, lottery winners, knife collectors and ex-military tax evaders, careerists, doomed politicians, musicologists, bread and butter men, buskers, anti-defamation lobbyists, government shills, bad feminists, okay feminists, slander enthusiasts, pollster workers and Wall Street propagandists, gun runners and unfamous poets and sort of famous poets and advice columnists, javelin throwers and failed nuclear warhead designers, and let's not forget beauty school dropouts, spam writers, cocktail artisans, viola wunderkinds, and Brazilian crust punks. And what about mall cops, secret service men, taxidermists, web hackers, hypnotherapists, and stunt actors, card sharks, and Bible thumpers, and porn stars, man children, fire eaters, and lumberjacks, bodyguards, and whistleblowers, conspiracy theorists, and hijackers, and children born without throats, and hung juries, and hangmen, and whomever death will not love. So if these poems don't throw themselves to your windows, please burn them. If you're the same person building himself a ham sandwich inside his living room after you finish them, please shoplift every edition of this book you can find. Please tear out the pages and please burn them to warm your house through the winter. The time of writing books that don't send us to jail is dead. Drinking vino verde under the harvest moon and puttering our lines at each other is dead. Asking yourself, and why do you keep asking yourself why a poem is the enemy of money? It's dead. If you will leave this book on a wood slat and gaping down at the world, please throw it on the floor instead, or instead please burn it, instead fire it out of a trebuchet at the White House. This book was written to terrify the fucking, like the last poems you read before the hostile takeover, like the first lines you spoke when the plane disappeared. This book was written to break the back of the sawhorse between you and the police. It's a book like the earth you might salt if you started a war against you. Thank you.
Hey, no move there.